Welcome to another edition of the Dean Legge Show here on Dog Post. Glad everybody could join in tonight. Obviously, Georgia losing in the SEC championship game to Alabama, but that sets up a big fight here with Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Really a big game for Georgia for sure. We're talking about a Sugar Bowl here. We're not talking about, a much smaller bowl where what happens in it doesn't really matter. In this case, when you start talking about bringing home championships like the Sugar Bowl, that's a big deal. So again, welcome everyone to the Dean Legge Show here on Dog Post. Lots of things to discuss. Did the committee get it right? Did they not get it right? The whole thing. I think they got it wrong. A lot of different reasons. Well, no, you know what? One basic reason. If this is about putting the best four teams into the playoff, that goal was not accomplished today. A lot of people would think that I'm going to run down Oklahoma. My issue really is more with Notre Dame than anyone else. I think Georgia's better than Notre Dame. I think that's clear. I think Oklahoma's better than Notre Dame. I'm not so sure Ohio State isn't better than Notre Dame. And then you've got, what you saw last night. And it does kind of get draining for the rules to change consistently. Last year, this was about had nothing to do with winning a conference championship. Today, I'll be honest, I had a hard time understanding where the committee chair was coming from with his sort of discussion of it. If you turn on this basically was about, did you beat every team on your schedule or not? And the truth of the matter is that Georgia had to beat Alabama, and everybody else didn't. And and Alabama had to beat Georgia, and they did by the skin of their teeth. So that's what this has become. I think the unfortunate thing is going to be that the rules next year will be completely different too, and that's the part that for me it's just disingenuous. It's hard to really understand. You hear Heather Dinich, who I don't know, and she's talking about non-conference schedule for Georgia. I'm just saying this off the top of my head. I'm not sure who Oklahoma played out of conference, but Army. I guess that's better than Georgia Tech. I'm not sure. Georgia didn't go to overtime with Army. With Georgia Tech. So I don't know. UCLA sucks. To schedule them as something that you try to do that because you're trying to effectively schedule appropriately if you're Oklahoma. Problem for them is, again, UCLA sucks, so your win there doesn't really do anything for you. Obviously, Florida Atlantic is terrible, and you went to overtime with an Army team that you have no business going to overtime with. And I can go on, but if you want to look at Notre Dame, that's, to me, almost even worse than Oklahoma. The barely beating Ball State, and that's just inexcusable. Having to hold on to beat USC, having to hold on to beat Pittsburgh. These are bad teams. Having to escape Vanderbilt at home. I'm assuming Notre Dame's best win is over Michigan, which was 13 weeks ago. And, it still matters. It does. But tell me on this schedule who Georgia would lose to. USC, Syracuse, Florida State, Northwestern, Navy, Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, Ball State, Michigan. Would they lose to Michigan? I don't think they would. Would Notre Dame beat Kentucky? Probably. Would they beat Alabama? No. Would they beat LSU? Probably not. Would they beat Florida? Would they beat South Carolina? Probably. Would they beat Auburn? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But, you know, all these hypotheticals are because you've gotten to the stage here where what really should be reality is just being skipped anymore. You know, last year, I thought Alabama was better than Ohio State and deserved to get in. They got in. This year, I think Georgia's better, certainly, than Notre Dame. I think they're probably better than Oklahoma. Las Vegas feels that way. Georgia just didn't win every single game they play. Well, every team they play they didn't defeat, which that did happen last year. If that's what the rules are, then let's understand that, configure the schedules appropriately, make Clemson play someone legitimate in a conference championship game, make Ohio State do the same thing. That's the aggravating thing, I think, for most Georgia people is you're really, with a straight face, going to sit there and tell the world that these conference championship games are all created equal, because they're not. And I think I say this all for the kids more than the fans. I mean, these kids, those locker rooms after the game are horrible. I mean, they're just brutal to take in. It's tough to watch the kids suffer. It really is. It's hard to know what to ask them. I mean, what are you really supposed to say when something devastating has happened like that to a kid that young? I mean, no one's died or anything like that, but these kids put a lot of effort and heart, time, etc. into it, and their path was just more difficult than anyone else's, period. And it just means, really, that you have to be undefeated. But I'll tell you this, by God, if Georgia and Alabama are undefeated next year, I don't care what happens in that game. They both should go in the playoff, period. Because there's just no reasonable explanation for Georgia, who's lost, 4 games in the last however many games, to be left out of this thing. It's amazing, frankly. It really is. I don't know what to say other than that. I mean, if Georgia has some of the schedule that these other guys did, they would, the likelihood of them being undefeated, there's just no doubt. And would Clemson have been left out last night if they had lost? Or do they get a mulligan too? I don't know. That's the part to me that is so utterly ridiculous, is that the rules are different. The situation's different all the time. And that's something this sport has got to clean up. There's tons of passion. I make a living off the passion. But we've got to get to the point here where this stuff makes sense. We've got to get to the point where it makes sense. I don't really think you can say that tonight. And probably one of the best 2 teams in the country is not playing for the national championship now as a result of it. If you don't think Georgia's one of the best 2 teams, I would imagine you would think they're one of the best 3 teams or 4 teams. And if you don't think that, then I just disagree with you and you're wrong. Georgia will play Texas in the 2019 Sugar Bowl. It's the 85th version of this game. These two have not played since the 1984 Cotton Bowl on January 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, where Georgia beat the Horns 10-9 on sort of just a wild finish to a game that was miserably cold, raining. Texas saw their national championship fall apart in their own backyard in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl, the old Cotton Bowl. Probably a horrible feeling for Texas. It would be the equivalent of Georgia losing the national championship, I guess, in Jacksonville or Atlanta. Just not what you want. Those if you hear those dings, those are people signing up for Dog Post. Why have you not signed up for Dog Post? DAWGPOST.com. It's the place to be for Georgia talk, insider access, recruiting, level-headed discussion of the dogs. You're not going to see people run down Jake Fromm and Justin Fields for just no reason at all. Let's talk about Kirby's decision to not punt there. Late in the game. I would have punted it. I would have. I knew someone was going to do a fake at some stage between Georgia and Bama, I would have punted it. I will say this, and I don't know if this was very clear on television. Georgia's defense was completely exhausted at the end of that game. That's the difference between Alabama and Georgia right now. And that's the difference between Alabama and anybody else. I do still think that Oklahoma, Clemson maybe could beat Alabama. And when I say maybe, I mean maybe. But they just, neither of them have, I mean, Oklahoma's defense is horrible. So they will not be able to stop Alabama. But you do wonder if what Georgia did to Tua is now the new formula. I mean, who has stopped Tua in his career? Georgia. That's it. So is it just Georgia and Kirby and them scheming it up? Was it the players Georgia's got? I'm not sure. But I just don't know. I think Clemson and Oklahoma can win those games. I'm not sure. I will have to believe it to see it. See it to believe it for those two teams to win. I think if Alabama was going to lose, it was probably last night. And it was probably just as soon as Rodrigo missed that kick, Georgia's chances really went downhill. Now, you can take that as me trying to, say something bad about Rodrigo. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not running down any of these kids, man. They played like champions last night. They did. Every kid on that field, Alabama, Georgia, whoever, I mean, they were balling out, all of them. It was an exceptionally good game. And I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about plays in the game. The fake punt, again, I would have kicked it. I see where Kirby's coming from, but now it's a thing. Not that he cares. But, 4th and 11 was more my issue than going for it. I don't think at the end of the day it necessarily cost them the game. I think if you want to pick out any play, you could do that. And that's what happens in these big games. I'm not even going to discuss the lack of penalties on Alabama. There's just no point. I think if you've been watching these on YouTube, listening on iTunes, or the various platforms by which you can consume Dog Post, you know what I've been saying, which is that you're just not going to get calls against Alabama. If Oklahoma thinks they're going to get calls, and maybe Oklahoma will because it will not be an SEC officiating crew, but if you think you're going to get calls against Alabama, you are completely fooling yourself. It's not going to happen. It will not happen. So you have to know that going in. The holds, the just mysterious pass interference penalty on Eric Stokes, the obvious late hit out of bounds. I mean, I don't think it's that there's like this conspiracy. I'm not that guy. I just think it's ingrained in the league, or the officials in this league, or officials generally speaking. They're just not going to do it. Maybe they think, hey, this is a big game. We're not going to call holding on anybody. I don't remember Georgia getting called holding for. I just don't see how you miss that personal foul call. Does that make a difference at the end of the game? I don't know, but you have to wonder why these things are not getting called at the end of the day. I mean, you're getting a lot of Duke calls, getting a lot of North Carolina calls, and the Michael Jordan calls. I don't know, and I think one day Georgia will benefit from that, I guess. But 2 games in a row, you've had some curious. Now, last year was far worse. But you've had some curious calls, and in tight games you're going to see that and hear that, and from people. It sounds like excuse making, and that's fine. If you want to call it that, that's fine. But that's not really what that was for me. I'm just curious. I'm curious about 2 things today. Number one, more importantly, what in the hell is the real parameter by which the committee is choosing these teams? If it is that you are undefeated, we need to know that. And teams like Alabama shouldn't be getting in last year. I mean, that's, if that's what this is, and, then again, they were, I guess, the best one-loss team. I don't know. After a while, I don't know. And every year, it's a different thing. It's a different And we know that the number 4 team can win the national championship. We just saw that a year ago. This isn't like the NCAA basketball where literally every team has the ability to win their conference tournament and play their way in. That's not all created equal either. Like, for instance, Georgia State's ability to get into the NCAA basketball tournament is not at all the same as Georgia's, just because of the league they play in. In this case, the league Georgia plays in, it's detrimental. It was detrimental this year. It wasn't detrimental last year, but they won the league. And it seems like the only time I can remember, and people can correct me, I'm just going off memory here. In 2011, non-SEC champion Alabama gets in. They play for the national championship. That gave us this playoff. Last year, non-SEC champion, non-division win Alabama gets in, wins the national championship. Are the rules different when Alabama is the team? I don't think so, because Nebraska has gone and played for the national championship without winning their conference. I just please quit saying it's the best 4 teams, because it's not. It's not the best 4 teams. It's just not. So please quit saying that. That's not what this is. This is the conferences leaning on one another, saying this is probably the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 leaning on the league, saying, look, we're not going to have 2 SEC teams in there again. We don't care. This is our pie. We're organizing this too. Oklahoma's in. That's I think what it is. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just like a working or thinking man's explanation of what happened. Because I don't think you can. You lose the spot to Notre Dame. If Notre Dame has a loss, Georgia probably plays in the national championship foursome. But not all these conferences are created equal. We've seen Clemson lose. I think this is the first. This is the second time they've been undefeated and gone into the playoff. They lost in the national championship, but they have twice lost and gotten in. They've lost to some bad teams and gotten in. Can we really say Georgia lost to a bad team this year? Both the teams they lost to are top 10 teams. Who's Clemson's best win? I'm asking. Who is their best win? Is it number 19 Texas A&M or number 20 Syracuse? Who is Notre Dame's best win? Michigan, I guess. Who's their other best win? Southern Cal? I don't know. Oklahoma's best win is Texas, and then they also have the win over West Virginia. I think the case for Oklahoma is compelling. It's not overwhelming by any stretch. So, and at the end of the day, you can say, hey, all you got to do is go win your conference. That's true. That's totally true. But if this, as soon as that, by the way, that doesn't guarantee anything. Ask Ohio State, ask UW, and ask, whoever else from last year. That doesn't guarantee anything. So, I just think we need to figure out what the real rules are. We need to understand completely what reality is. It is not the best 4 teams. If it were the best 4 teams, it would be Georgia. Kirk Herbstreit is not a moron. He knows what he's talking about. It was pretty clear yesterday. Kirk Herbstreit, David Pollock, even Jesse Palmer decided to get on the train. Joey Galloway, I don't know what his deal is with Georgia. I don't know if he still thinks Michigan's better than Georgia. I don't know. I just don't know sometimes with some of these guys. It's just, I don't know if they watch the games or not. But at least he didn't make the case that Ohio State should have gotten in and Georgia shouldn't have. That would have been insane. But, back to the fake punt. I don't like it because of the length of the try. I don't hate the fake punt. I don't like the 11 yards. Kirby is correct. It was there, it looked like to me. But the backer got out there pretty quick. You could still call timeout. Justin, it might have been too late to call timeout by the time they wanted it. But if that's the case, twice in that game on special teams they had clock management issues, because Rodrigo told me after the game that they felt rushed, and they probably should have. He didn't say they probably should have taken a 5-yard penalty, but he said they should not have taken a timeout. and they should have just waited, which sort of indicates to me that you got time out. The good thing is too, man, you know, these kids, they get up there, or they're in the locker room after the game. It's uncomfortable for everyone, needless to say. And guys like Rodrigo really owned it. They did. I've not seen Jake Fromm that upset in my time at Georgia. I only saw him play at Houston a couple of times. He was pretty upset last night for sure. And at the podium, he only had one question. And I think it was about the fake punt. But I think this is one more recruiting class, maybe two, away from closing these games out. You know, 2012, that was about Georgia's elite players playing elite the entire time and their depth catching up to them and them coming barely close, painfully close. Last night, or excuse me, 2016 was, again, you saw the depth of Alabama. I mean, there's not a lot of teams more talented than Georgia. Alabama is at least as talented, if not slightly more talented. But they're both in the same neighborhood. And last night was seeing that something that's 3 years into it and something that's had 5 full recruiting cycles. You lose Jonathan Ledbetter, who is just a hell of a player, a kid who has turned his life around. You lose DeAndre Walker, who has grown up. Well, between him and Ledbetter, that duo has grown up more than anybody, I think. And you lose DeAndre Baker. So you lose 3, guys off that defense who are damn good. DeAndre Walker may not be a super high-level NFL pick. Same thing for Ledbetter, but they'll get drafted. Baker will go in the first round for sure. But Ledbetter and DeAndre have been the heart. I mean, certainly Ledbetter of this team. And, Lamont Galliard. I mean, you got a lot of guys, and those are the last guys of the Richt, era, the Richt world. Kirby's narrowly lost a couple of national championships. I mean, last night wasn't the national championship, but I'm having a hard time figuring out how someone else besides Georgia can beat Alabama. I'm not saying that, for being a Georgia guy and all that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you just watch the lines, it's going to be tough for Oklahoma to stop Alabama. Clemson just might not match up well with Alabama in the way that they did a couple of years ago with Deshaun. That may be what that is more than anything else. I give Notre Dame no shot. I mean, the only way that they advance to the college championship game is if Dabo screws it up. And he shows every year that he is more than willing to screw up a game. He hasn't done that yet this year. But I just can't see that. I think it should be. I mean, it shouldn't be Alabama, Clemson, but it will be. And it's hard. And then you're going to hear the narrative of this Clemson-Alabama thing, and Clemson better keep it close because that narrative's gotten old too. I gotta say, that narrative has definitely gotten old, for sure. Bank South, our wonderful sponsor. They've really been awesome. As a Georgia fan, you know how important a good performance is to reaching an overall goal. Bank South is no different. That's why Bank South designed an all-new checking account that performs for you to help you reach your financial goals. Open an interest-bearing performance checking account at Bank South today and let your money perform for you. Visit banksouth.com today for more information. Bank South is a Georgia-based community bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Georgia-based company for sure. Bank South's in your community. It's a community-based bank that can do, real deal business stuff too. For the record, they've been great to us, and we really appreciate them. This is the focus for December. We'll talk about the Horns in the future as well. Number one thing is closing out this class. There's not a lot of guys that Georgia's fighting Alabama for or with, or however you put that. This could wind up being a special class again. It definitely could, and we'll just have to see how Georgia closes from here on out. There are some guys out there that I did not anticipate that they would be kind of after, or legitimately after, I guess you could say, who are also looking at them. But again, this is an important time for this class. And they've got some guys on the hook that they may be able to close with that I did not expect. Number 2, obviously get ready for Texas. Georgia may practice once or twice this week, may not, I don't know. But they will probably start practice for this Sugar Bowl more on the 16th or so. That's typically when finals are completely over. And I think these guys will be ready and looking forward. It's not every day you can compete for a legitimate bowl game championship. The Sugar Bowl is a big deal. It's a big deal, period. And anyone who thinks it's not a big deal is nuts. That you're not playing in the national championship semifinals is understood. But this is a huge deal. There's not a lot of years that you get a chance to win the Sugar Bowl. Kirby Smart, in theory, could spend 2 of his first 3 years at Georgia winning the Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl. Now, there's only a few more other bowls to collect along the way to sweeping all of them. Georgia is one of the few schools in the country who's won every major bowl. In fact, I'm not sure if there might not be. For a long time, it was just Georgia, I think, and maybe one other school. But the Sugar Bowl is a huge deal. It's a massive part of the ethos that is Georgia. National championship, you've won there. You've won conference. You're the first SEC school to represent the conference in the Sugar Bowl's agreement after the 76 season, if my math is correct. Played Pittsburgh, tried to stop them winning the national championship. There's a guy named Tony Dorsett who was a little bit too much for them. Sugar Bowl is a great event. I have done the Sugar Bowl. This will be my 4th Sugar Bowl in 18 years. It's a pretty good record for the Dogs, actually, right there. But yeah, look, it's a big deal game. I think it's too bad they are not playing in the Orange Bowl or the Cotton Bowl. But this is a huge game. It's also interesting that Alabama said, you know what, Clemson, you're going to Dallas. I thought that was kind of funny myself. It was mainly to avoid Oklahoma having all their people there, but that really was funny. And then last here from Bank South, our friends at Bank South, the past is the past. You can't control what happened yesterday. Now, that is easier said than done, not just for people as old as I am, but certainly for the kids who really gave their heart and soul out there. Not just the Alabama kids, but the kids from Georgia. J.R. Reed played great. There were a lot of really good plays last night from everybody. And it's tough. It's crushing. It's not a good feel. The Georgia fans, probably 65 or 70% of that crowd last night, which is also telling you something. It's hard to see the light after days like last night. And it's also naive to think that Georgia won't be playing for and winning national championships again soon. They're just too good. Now, that Alabama is around only speaks to this, and I'll talk about this more in the future. You're just going to have to beat Alabama. You're not just going to have to beat them. You're going to have to drive a stake through their heart, because otherwise they're not going to die. And then you can't wait around for Nick Saban to retire. You got to do it while he's there. You got to do it next year. And look, I don't know that this is true, but if this is the worst Georgia team that Kirby will have, which is possible, then folks better look out, because they controlled that game. And what cost it was the depth at the end. Yeah, I'd look out if I were everybody else. You've been listening to the Dean Legge Show. go on over to dogpost.com right now. You can read a lot of the information we've got. There's going to be plenty of information coming out soon. $2 for 2 months. $2 for 2 months. Dogpost.com. Why aren't you going there right now to sign up? Thank you for joining me tonight. This has been the Dean Legge Show presented by Bank South.